what do we do? What do we do to, and now I'm sort of pushing and challenging, but from a strategic point of view, how do we begin to reweave this common humanity in the face of such powerful forces, not only privatization, but the cultural dynamics that legitimize ownership and privatization?
Yeah, well, trends right now are not moving in very helpful directions. I think one of the things that's missing, maybe more than anything else in capitalism, is this notion of protection. The only thing that's protected in capitalism is property. People aren't protected. The biosphere is not protected. You know, different species are not protected. And if we say, okay, every human community has to provide for itself, protect itself, and find social meaning, there's a total absence of protection.
If capitalism is the protection of ownership, as opposed to the protection of the biosphere, of people's livelihoods, then we have to deal with the structure of capitalism, the way that it operates. Yes? Right. And so, what is your vision then for something different?
Right.
So, and if this is your contribution, I guess, to the national and the international conversation. What would your advice to people be? How would you recreate that national and international system for provision and protection and social meaning?
So the reason I'm not a socialist is because I think, for the most part, in the history of socialism, it stayed within the antagonism of social groups. So it was the workers against the owners, or poor people against rich people. What the civic does is gives us a new foundation. I actually thought about civicism, where we see each other as citizens. Now, it's certainly true that for people of privilege and people in power, it's not an easy to accept an invitation for moral equality. But we can give that invitation to them. So I think there is a way of developing a civic consciousness, the notion of a global citizen, that would move us forward, and it changes the conflicts. They're not social conflicts, finally. It's a conflict between who will participate in the conversation about how to live together and who refuses to participate.
So the invitation can be offered, but you can't force people to the table.
No, no. And, you know, that's, if you go back to these three forms of persuasion, incentives, and regulation, regulation's to protect us, right? I think that, you know, there's a lot of people working on the new economy, alternative economies, who have given up on government. And I can certainly, you look at what's going on in the United States, you can understand why. But I don't think we will make it without a lot of regulation. We need to protect people, we need to protect the earth.
At a federal and international level.
Exactly. And so I think politics is the avenue we have to work in.
I think, I mean, my own sense is that the Occupy movement was an invitation for a new conversation and it was a civic space where people were radically deliberating about the way that they want their society to run.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the invitation was accepted by the powers that be. And so that creates the dynamics of antagonism as opposed to conversation. But some icing on the cake to leave with a message. If people wanted to take your message forward and use your ideas to create the social changes that they want, what would your advice be to them? What would you ask people to do, or what would you advise people to do in order to create the civic and to create new foundations for protection, provision, for social meaning?
Well, let me take a step back and talk about, just share something about my own self-understanding. It's when I was young. I was in the march from Selma to Montgomery in 1965. And before that, I was a college student and in Nebraska. And I wondered how I was going to change the world. And I didn't think one person could change the world. And what came to me, and it's kind of stayed with me my whole life, is I didn't have to change the world. I wanted to participate in a certain kind of life that I knew other people were doing. And people had done before I was born, and people would do after I died. That there's a tradition of changing the world, and it may change it or not, but the energy and really the meaning is by participating in that tradition. And I think, you know, there's millions of us that will continue to participate in that tradition. I've been working on kind of the history of the civic, because our country, United States, was, like I said, it was a commercial revolution, only property owners could vote. But then after the Civil War, thousands of Africans who didn't own property could vote. And then in the 1920s, women got the right to vote. In the 1930s, workers got the right to organize. For the first time, workers were seen and had civic rights. Right? And there was a civil rights movement that stopped segregation. And then, so there have been these movements, and each time there's been this massive reaction to them, right? And that's what we're experiencing now. I think for the last 30 years, the right-wing rich powers have taken on a job of destroying more progressive movements, and they're fairly successful. But, you know, the story's not over. And so there probably will be, maybe 10 years from now, another surge toward kind of a moral high ground. Seems to be where we're going.
Okay, great. Okay, well, thanks, Marvin. I really appreciate you spending the time.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.